Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, the podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Myslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. This episode is sponsored by Ava Jane's Kitchen Colima Sea Salt. This salt, harvested from the ancient Colima salt flats in Mexico, is super delicious, super crunchy, and free of ocean-borne microplastics. Tastes great on everything from steak to eggs to water to coffee. I personally use it in all my meals and between meals for a bit of a pick-me-up. Just go like this. Very good. And with every purchase, you'll be supporting the show and the Solineros that work tirelessly to bring you this delicious salt. Check out carnivorecastsalt.com, all one word. That's Carnivore Cast Salt. Get your first bag of Colima sea salt absolutely free. Only pay for shipping. Brett and Harry are the hosts of the Meat Mafia Podcast, which addresses fundamental problems in our food and healthcare system. Their principles are simple: eat real food, buy locally, and cook your own meals. They're advocates of carnivore and animal-based forms of eating. Brett used a carnivore diet to put his ulcerative colitis and IBS into full remission. Brett and Harry are also competitive low-carb ultra-endurance athletes, having completed Ironmans, 100K ultras, marathons, and numerous triathlons. Wow, that's awesome. Cool. Well, welcome to the show, Brett and Harry.
Thanks for having us, Scott. I'm pumped to be here.
So I'd love to start with maybe we can hear a little bit about like why you started the podcast and what got you into that.
Perfect. Yes, we started writing online in December of last year, really just trying to get some information out there about what was happening in the food system. And it quickly turned into us writing on Twitter, and we saw that a ton of growth happened really quickly. A lot of people were looking for information around health, and honestly, the podcast was just like the next iteration. So we got really excited about the idea of just getting some of these guests on who had inspired us to get down the carnivore rabbit hole, and quickly just dove right in. We've had some like amazing guests on, Sean Baker, Rob Wolf, a host of others, but it was really inspired by writing online and then just wanting to iterate to the next step pretty quickly.
Yeah. And Scott, I think to add to what Harry said too, it's like a lot of our content is just inspired by our own experiences with this certain style of eating. I think, both Harrison and I, our story is that we played college baseball together, graduated, started working corporate jobs, and both kind of had our own separate health journeys, and realized that once we made the return to real foods and cooking our meals and relying on a lot of really good quality animal protein and saturated fat, the health issues that we were dealing with went away. We felt amazing. And then we were just like consuming a lot of this information. And we got to a point where we were like, well, why don't we start to put some of this information out here, especially from two guys that have been consuming this stuff for a long time, and try and make it a little bit more easily digestible for people, because, we're not MDs, we're not nutritionists, but we've kind of put in the 10,000 hours and have had our own, successful journeys with through diet and lifestyle.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can certainly relate as a former college athlete and having my own host of health issues coming out of that.
Yes.
And no real nutrition guidance. I definitely want to get into both of your kind of health stories, but I'm curious, like looking back on where you are now, this is something I often wonder. Do you think like there will ever be any form, good or bad, of like consistent nutrition information for college athletes? Because at least in my experience, and I was a lightweight rower, so it involved like a lot of cutting weight, so nutrition is even more important, kind of like wrestling. There was none. There was like no even acknowledgement that you were eating food. It was like, just make the weight every time before the race, and that's it. Like, whatever, go do what you need to do.
Yeah, it's really a shame, because I think it's a massive oversight in terms of the performance conversation that gets overlooked. Brett and I both, I think we kind of epitomize the idea of when we were competitive baseball players. It was like fit but unhealthy in some ways. Like the lifestyle didn't necessarily support all the things that we were doing in the gym, both of us being extremely dialed in on the gym, but then there's obviously a lot of improvements or enhancements that could happen just through improving diet. So it's an interesting question. I think nutrition is just such a soft science, and getting consensus on it is a challenge because everyone has their take. But I think with like the dissemination of these types of podcasts and information, it kind of empowers people to go down these rabbit holes for themselves and just see how they can optimize their own health through nutrition. But Brett, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, it just seems like, in particular with college athletics, there's such a strong emphasis on strength and conditioning, but I don't ever remember being spoken to by like a nutritionist in college, or like all of us, we were having like 5:30 morning lifts and taking, just loading up on caffeine. And then afterwards, like just jamming like these protein powders, which are just dehydrated whey protein with preservatives that are making it shelf stable. And no one was ever saying, hey, if you had just eaten a steak after, it's like the best, most complete form of protein and recovery that you could possibly have. But I think what's cool is that this movement, I mean, Harry graduated 2016, I graduated 2017. Dude, you know this because you're helping to lead the space. There's been such an amazing amount of content that's come out just in that 5-year period that I know some guys that are college athletes at a couple D1 programs in the Northeast, and they're saying that they're really into the animal-based movement, and they're seniors on the team, and they're taking like honey with sea salt as their form of pre-workout, and they're eating ground beef after their lifts, and they're teaching the younger guys about this stuff. So, and then you see other Main Street athletes like Noah Syndergaard, huge pitcher for the Phillies, all-star pitcher. He's adopting an animal-based diet. So hopefully we can get some of these bigger influencers that are performing at the highest level to understand how good they feel with animal protein. And then that can kind of like disseminate down to the lower levels.
Yeah, that's really cool. Oh, go ahead, Harry.
I was just going to add, like, it's easy to be pessimistic because there's so much bad information out there, but it does seem like on the performance side of things, the truth eventually kind of reaches the surface over a long enough time period. Like if these animal-based athletes really do have an edge, I think people will look to that and see that, oh, hey, maybe I can get a performance edge just by changing my diet and eating a little bit more nutritionally, trying to find whole foods. I do think one of the problems with college athletics is you're on like a college budget usually. So you do opt for like those easy, simple fixes where, oh, hey, maybe I can just slam protein powder instead of going and getting ground beef from the cafeteria or, whatever it is. So it does have a little bit more of a limiting factor in that regard. But I think if the information gets out there, exactly to what Brett was saying, people will start following it just because they think they can get an edge.
This episode is brought to you by Bioptimizers and their amazing magnesium breakthrough formula for stress relief and better sleep on a carnivore diet. Try it yourself at www.magnesiumbreakthrough.com/carnivorecast and use code carnivore10 to save and help support the show. For August, they've prepared a special offer for our listeners. You'll be able to buy magnesium and get free bottles of the full line of digestive health products, including Maxizymes, patented probiotics, and more. Check them out at magnesiumbreakthrough.com/carnivorecast. And remember to use carnivore10. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's definitely coming a long way. And I'd be really curious to see like what types of sources of information some college athletes are consuming now. Because I graduated in 2014. And at least in my early days in college, like podcasts weren't even a thing. Instagram wasn't even really a thing. I feel old, but there wasn't even an acknowledgement of like, it's important to get protein after your workouts or like make sure you're fueling for your workouts. There was nothing. So it's crazy how little there was. But yeah, interesting topic, just something I thought it would be appropriate to ask you both. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear maybe one at a time, kind of how you found your way to this way of eating, or maybe bounce back and forth, and some of the things you were experiencing before.
Yeah, I think Harry and our stories play off of each other really well. some of the medical issues that I was facing were a little bit more rare, whereas I think some of the stuff that Harry was experiencing is extremely relatable to a lot of people when they start to work a corporate job. But just a little bit on myself. For me, I had adopted a carnivore style of eating, just trying to treat ulcerative colitis through diet and lifestyle. So in 2016, I was interning going into my senior year of college, and I started noticing like just this increased urge to have to go to the bathroom. And, I ended up going to the bathroom. It was probably like 20 to 30 times a day, like typically straight blood, just because I really wasn't processing anything that I was eating. I got hospitalized and got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is an autoimmune disease that affects, I think it's somewhere between like 600 to 900,000 people in the US. And it affects your large intestine, which is your colon. Crohn's is kind of like the sister disease to that. It affects your small intestine. And it's basically like your colon just gets so inflamed, either through genetics, diet, lifestyle, stress. I think it was probably some combination of all four for me, that you're just not processing anything that you're eating. And so with all these autoimmune diseases, whether it's Crohn's, colitis, IBS, psoriasis, eczema, they say that it's incurable. So the best that you can do is put it into remission. So for me, I got on a drug called Remicade, which was a biologic drug administered through an IV. I would get that every 8 weeks, and the medication was like $50,000 per infusion. So luckily, I had good insurance and good benefits through my company, but I'm costing the medical system $400,000 per year. Plus, you can do the math on everyone else that's on Remicade. I mean, the numbers are absolutely outrageous. So, I'm basically told that I need to be on this drug for my entire life. And then I was working a tech sales job in New York in 2019. And that was when I first stumbled across Sean Baker going on Rogan's podcast, basically talking about how amazing animal products are, how digestible they are, how we've evolutionarily been designed to be carnivore, which I thought was interesting. And then the kicker was he started talking about all these anecdotal instances of people that are effectively curing these autoimmune conditions by adopting this animal-based or carnivore style of eating. So for me, I'm like, well, why would I not try and at least implement some of these foods? Because I don't want to be dependent on a drug every 8 weeks that also has a whole host of other side effects. So like I very vividly remember like in 2019, just eating all animal products, steak, chicken, eggs, some fish, water. I did do a little bit of coffee, and literally, Scott, within like the first 4 to 5 days, my symptoms went down to, I think I was going to the bathroom like twice a day within 4 to 5 days. And it's funny, right? Because you hear a lot of stories of people that go carnivore that have these issues, and a lot of issues will clear up within the first week. And then since then, it's just kind of been this progression of just getting more and more refined with it, cooking my meals, being very intentional about where my fats are coming from. And, I've implemented things like fruit and raw milk and vegetables, and I'll cycle back and forth with those things. And sometimes I'll go back to strict carnivore. Sometimes I'll throw in some other products. But since that time, all of my inflammation is effectively, and microinflammation has gone away, and I'm completely, drug free now, which is, it's just an amazing testament to when you're giving your body the foods and the nourishment that it actually wants, how it can actually perform. So, that's kind of my health journey. And then, obviously Harrison's had his own awesome experience with this diet.
Yeah. And I think, as Brett said, my story kind of complements his nicely because it's different, but it's pretty relatable. So, in college, I was always the guy who's very focused, like performance-based in the gym and mindful of diet. So I had experimented with a paleo diet in college, and had honestly gotten like the best shape of my life. Went sophomore year of college playing baseball, eating a paleo diet. And so at that point, I was really dialed in with, how I was feeling, got in tune with just like that amazing energy you feel when you're eating right. But once I graduated, my priorities shifted. I worked at a corporate job, and the training went down, and then my focus on the nutrition kind of got lost. So, within a matter of a few years, I was not feeling like the athlete that I once was. And, that was concerning to me. So when COVID hit, I really wanted to spend more time just focusing on how I can really dial in my nutrition and create like a really strong foundation of my health. I'd kind of lost that in a lot of ways. I had put on a little extra weight, wasn't feeling as healthy as I used to. And so I experimented with a keto diet, and I was cooking basically all of my meals, which previously when I was working, I was going to lunch, getting the fast casual foods, like still trying to eat relatively healthy. But, there was always those nights where you were working long hours and they had snacks in the kitchen, and it was just an easy choice to, go into the kitchen and grab a bag of chips or grab some Oreos, and just start snacking. So the keto diet and cooking my meals really kind of just put the autonomy back in my hands. And I was really kind of just, the spark was lit and the flame was lit at that point, where I was like, okay, I went from basically cooking like maybe one meal a day to 100% of my meals. And I was focused on, quality ingredients, prepping, learning new recipes that fit this kind of keto mold. But, keto is kind of like a wide umbrella. And I was really just eating an animal-based diet. And at that point, I kind of came across the work with Sean Baker and some of the stuff that Paul Saladino were doing, and just kept getting inspired by this idea of maybe trying to narrow the goalposts a little bit and work more towards a carnivore diet. So, I experimented with that as I kind of went along that journey and just try to keep things really simple. When COVID hit, I got a lot of time allotted back to me. So I was able to, the gyms were closed, but I was just focused on, on the activity front. I was just going on long walks and trying to keep my performance and training stuff very simple and just focus on the nutrition side of things, which I think gave me a unique lens of really building out this foundation of health. And, I saw my body and my health transform incredibly quickly. 6 weeks, I was down 20 pounds, back to the best shape of my life. And it was really all just through the nutrition, spending the time in the kitchen and just getting to enjoy that process. Obviously not having any social obligations really helped support that. My lifestyle was pretty simple, just being, isolated to basically one location. But, at the end of the day, that was kind of the spark for me, where I was like, okay, this is the lifestyle I want to be living going forward, and just kind of continuing to tinker with carnivore and animal-based. And as Brett said, I think for me, I view carnivores as a real tool. I kind of sit in that animal-based bucket where, I just recently ordered a quarter cow. I cook about I cook 100% of my meals, and most of them are centered around that, idea of sourcing really high quality ingredients and trying to buy in bulk and just cook. I have that cow, so I'm cooking basically all these different styles of beef recipes, adding in some eggs, and I found that to be the best thing that works for me. So it's been an amazing journey. I think that our stories kind of complement each other well, in terms of Brett really didn't have a choice, and I was there. I was kind of your average guy who's working their job and just trying to figure out, okay, how can I avoid all this garbage that's getting thrown in my face through this demanding job, long hours and kind of a stressful environment. And it's if you can optimize your diet and nutrition and you're working a corporate job, you're definitely leaps and bounds ahead of the people who you're surrounding yourself with. So, I found it to be, an amazing kickstarter for me in terms of just what we're doing now, and just continuing to kind of push the envelope in all aspects of life.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's awesome. And it's definitely relatable. Both of your stories, I think, actually very similar to my wife and myself. Her having to do it out of obligation and actually being diagnosed with Crohn's at one point.
Oh, wow.
And then, she almost went on the drugs for life, but was able to kind of reverse the diagnosis with carnivore. And then myself, similarly, just starting a corporate job, having worse and worse eating habits, and feeling worse and worse, and having some of my own digestive problems and gaining weight. And I love that both of you really emphasize the cooking aspect. I think that's such an underrated skill. And it's really cool that you both talk about that a lot.
Yeah, I would say that as we've everything has progressed very quickly with what we're doing, which is amazing. But I think that if there's one focal point above all else that we really try and push is this emphasis on just like sourcing your own food and really taking the time to prepare those meals. And really just you have the ability to control the inputs. It's really difficult to be healthy when you're eating out, even if you're trying to stick to a carnivore diet. It's, it's one thing if you're traveling and you're going to get a steak here or there, but you really just don't have control over the oils that they're cooking it in or the preservatives that they're using or some of these other ingredients, or even if they're using like a sauce or a dressing or a marinade that has like seed oils in it. It's just very difficult. But, and the stuff, it's not hard, right? It's like neither Harrison or I could really cook prior to going on this journey. And we started with like very basic things like, steak, ground beef, learning how to roast a chicken. And then you progress from there. And I think, Harrison, you were doing you were trying to implement one new recipe a week or something like that, just to really build out like that repertoire of recipes. And now here you are, it's like you have a quarter cow and you have all these different ways that you can prepare red meat, but it's like it's all started with that progression of like just first learning how to cook ground beef and kind of progress up from there.
Yeah, and going back to this idea, like Brett and I are both ex-college athletes, and we don't have PhDs, but I think kind of reducing this whole thing down into we are trying to make people healthy, and I think the easiest way to make people healthy is controlling the inputs. And whether you're going on like more of like a vegan diet or like almost any diet you choose to go down, if you're controlling the inputs and cooking your meals, it's going to be really hard to not get healthier in some ways, right? Like, I think it eliminates a lot of the processed garbage, a lot of the refined sugars, a lot of packaged foods. So when you start thinking about it in that way, like there's oversimplification of everything. We think like cooking your own meals and prepping your meals is just a massive, like, if you're going to focus on one thing, let it be that, because it'll have a massive positive externality. Even if you do choose to do like a different style of eating, different than carnivore.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, to add on some things that Brett said, like I started off just trying to do like one meal a week that was different. And it started with like getting a Dutch oven and learning how to do some slow cooking recipes. And that was huge for me because I could kind of batch out like 4 to 5 meals for the week, just in like a 2-hour period or depending on what I was cooking, maybe a little bit longer with the slow cooking stuff. But, I could kind of meal prep for the week in a really simple way. And just that concept of trying to add one little meal to my repertoire each week kept it interesting, kept it fun. And it didn't put a whole lot of stress on me, which I think a lot of people feel when they're trying to like turn their health stories around. It's like the stress and pressure that they need to be perfect. And honestly, it was like setting the bar low, but honestly, it made it so I could sustain it and continue to build momentum. And, kept it interesting. I think when you're building new skills, you're engaged, you want to learn more. And that's like a huge part of this whole process.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate of that with any goal, weight loss or anything. What's a small change you can make that will be easy to stick to. And I think one thing you both hit on that I really liked is Brett said it's pretty hard to have a good diet when you're not preparing any of your own meals. Mm-hmm. And then Harry, you said it's pretty hard to have an unhealthy diet if you are cooking all your own meals. I think it's very well said.
Yeah, there's just a certain intentionality that comes with it. And I think it could, I think starting a carnivore diet or keto or paleo could be overwhelming for a lot of people because you're taking everything and, going on this new journey. But like for us, it was very simple things like I was mentioning, like learning how to cook ground beef or learning how to properly sear a steak or a chicken. But it's like these things are so simple, but they're very delicious. And you get to a point where you realize, oh, wow, from start to finish, I can have an amazing steak that costs me $10 to $12. And it's ready to go in less than 10 minutes. I chop it up, I put it into a glass Tupperware container, and then I have it ready to go for the next day. So it's like just all these little things that compound over and over again. And then you eventually, you just have your flow and your schedule. And the big thing is that when you're cooking all of your meals, you start to get this baseline understanding of what it actually feels like to have great metabolic health. That was one of the first things that Harry and I, and I'm sure yourself too, Scott, noticed is like having this energy and this vitality to pop out of bed, not having to go to the bathroom multiple times a day, making great gains in the gym and getting that ideal body composition, you now have this understanding of how good you can feel by eating real foods that we've evolutionarily been designed to eat. And then it's like, you don't even think of these things as costs. You want to just keep doing it. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. And how did like the Meat Mafia idea come up? And I think that's a really cool like branding. How did you guys land on that?
I really wish we had a better story for this, honestly. So Brett and I were living together last year, just around this time frame, actually. So we had competed in an Ironman together. We're living under the same roof for about a month and cooked all our meals together. We're really just like enjoying this process of like this as a college athlete, just like that preparation period, like where you have an event or you have your season coming up and you're just really dialed in with the preparation, the training, the nutrition. And so that month was kind of the catalyst for us to start what we were doing now. And it started with writing online. And initially we kind of took these anonymous names to Twitter. And we didn't really know. I was writing for a different blogger at the time, and we didn't really know which direction we were going to go in. We just wanted to start writing about the food system. And so I chose a mafia name just because I thought it was kind of fitting for what was happening with the food narratives out there, right? Like if these vegan movements are popping up and kind of like top down trying to control the narrative around food, we needed this kind of mafia mentality, mafia mindset to fight back. And so we both love these Godfather movies and mafia movies. So we took these mafia characters and I think the inspiration for the Meat Mafia was really just kind of iterations and trying to like fiddle around with names that could stick and sound like they had some a little bit of like this like small under the radar sort of style to them. And I think that was kind of like what we were going for, but we didn't really have too much foresight at the time. We didn't really know which direction it was going to be going into. But I think it fits perfectly for what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's definitely catchy and memorable. And how did you both get into kind of the ultra endurance space and doing Ironman and ultras and marathons?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is, when we graduated, Harrison moved to Boston and then I moved to New York, and we both kind of just separately started doing these endurance races, which is interesting because there's a lot of like contentious debate just online over running and endurance versus strength training. And I think there's great arguments on both sides, but I think for both of us, the endurance races has just been an amazing way to compete against yourself. And there's this amazing spiritual component that comes to that. So I would say that like, even though I played baseball, like I really didn't start running until after I graduated. And it's like a progression, like everything else, like we're talking about with the diet, where it's like, you go out, you do a 4-mile run, then you push yourself and do a 6-miler, then an 8-miler. And then you're saying to yourself, all right, well, why don't I do a half marathon? And then that half marathon leads to you doing more. And then, doing a full marathon. And then for us, it was really the Ironman. We ended up doing Ironman Texas last year, like Harry mentioned. And I think for us, that was just kind of a way to break the rut of COVID. Like, routines are great, but they can also be a rut. And we both just wanted to get out of the Northeast and just do something that would really help kind of be like a focal point for our year and push ourselves, mentally, physically, spiritually. So we ended up signing up for that race. And like Harrison had mentioned, like just the energy of having like another great friend around and just cooking our meals and pushing ourselves. That's really what, led us and gave us the confidence to do what we were doing now, because we're basically sitting here saying, hey, look, we're two guys that have had great success with this diet and lifestyle. Yet as a society, we're metabolically failing, where it's like 70% of adults are overweight or obese. Our kids are now about 40% of children are overweight or obese. 1 in 10 kids have fatty liver disease. So, something that was formerly reserved for like aged alcoholics, our kids are getting from eating too much sugar. Like there's something that needs to be done about this. And can we kind of establish a voice and an angle to dig into some of that stuff? But, it's like our brand is basically built off of the backs of pushing ourselves through these races. And, something that we always try and do is like, just put one big race on the year that kind of scares us, that we can center our year around. So like in August, we ended up doing a 100K race. It was called the Habanero 100. So it was in Houston, Texas, and they called it the
I'm gonna
Habanero
get
100.
PTSD.
Yeah. they call it the Habanero 100 because it's like the hottest part of the country, the hottest part of the year, and then they start the race at 12 p.m. So the hottest part of the day. So there were definitely some
Great idea.
Yeah, it was a great idea. It was really smart. But it's like, but it's so funny when you recount it, because you learn so much about yourself through the training and the races. And that's just really like how we like to structure ourselves and have fun with it and kind of turn it into an adventure.
Yeah, I think that I was literally sitting here listening to you talk, Brett, and I was thinking the mental side of it is so important, but I do think that this scratches an itch for us, which is kind of that adventure aspect. Like these long races bring you from the highest of highs to lowest of lows, and it's just these things that you can bring with you through your day-to-day life that you'll be able to. It helps you kind of center yourself on like a yearly basis, but like day to day, you also kind of realize that like handling adversity is really just a matter of perspective. And I think through those races, you can always like get through those troubling times with just like a stronger mindset and a little bit of a good perspective. And these tests that we kind of try to put ourselves through are definitely supportive in trying to just build out like a stronger mindset. And I also think it helps Brett and I, we've done a few of these races together, just build a closer connection, closer bond into all the stuff that we're trying to do with the Meat Mafia.
Yeah, that's really cool. It definitely has a certain appeal. And I kind of got that out of my system in college rowing, and doing, 4 hours of high volume training a day. But
Yeah,
I can definitely see why people like it.
Being on the water at 6 a.m., I'm sure that was a great time.
Yeah. But yeah, I'd love to hear what are like some of your goals with the Meat Mafia podcast, and maybe where folks can find out more about it and follow along.
Yeah, I think Harry and I can tag team this one, but it's been really special for us just to see the progression of everything in a relatively short period of time. Like Harrison had mentioned, we started writing on Twitter in January, and then we've launched episode 1 of the show. I think it was March 1st. And so since that time, we've done about 120 episodes. So
wow.
It's probably too much content, but for us, it's like we've seen shows like yourself that have been like pretty inspirational to us. And we've said, look, we're going from never have done a podcast before to really wanting to get on guests that we think could help people be healthier. So we want to be we want to create the best possible listening experience for our guests. And the only way that we're going to do that is just continue to get behind the camera and get really engaging guests on. So like really the question that we're trying to answer through the show is like, why are we so unhealthy as a society? But then how do we bring together some practical solutions that can help people get healthier? So, we've had on a number of great doctors, nutritionists, experts in that space. And then Harrison and I have also really dove deep into regenerative agriculture and building connectivity with our rancher and farmer and improving the quality of our soil health. And so some of the coolest episodes for us or having people that are in the regen space or having a 4th generation rancher on the show whose whole purpose is like to nourish you and your family with the best quality animal protein possible and help expose people to that connection to our food that we've really lost. Like Harrison has mentioned, like he's been very intentional about, connecting with a farmer and getting a quarter or a half cow from them. That was like a foreign concept to us a year ago, where we had like had great experience with carnivore, but we didn't really have this connection with our farmer, or we weren't thinking grass-fed versus grass-finished. So we want to try and like touch on all those little nuanced points so people can walk away from every episode just feeling like they have a better understanding of our food system, and really just how to be healthier overall. I don't know if I missed anything there, Harry.
No, you crushed it, man. I think that some of the things that we're thinking about is just like, how do we get, closer to our food system and more engaged with what's going on? Because I think that's kind of the fundamental issue that's happened over decades and decades, is that we've just grown further and further away from the food that we're putting in our body, or the things that we think are food that we're putting in our body. So just trying to educate around those points. And Brett and I have a few exciting things in store for the next 6 to 12 months. We're actually moving out onto a farm to try to learn how to grow some of our own food, and
That's awesome.
Get our hands dirty a little bit and figure out some of this farming and ranching lifestyle for ourselves. So just trying to think of creative ways to get really good information out there for people to just get a little bit of inspiration to improve their health, one step at a time, because that's obviously how Brett and I did it.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I'm really looking forward to following along that journey. And yeah, I'll have links to everything in the show notes, but where are some good places for folks to find you?
Yeah. So I mean, Twitter is where we started, but I think if you go to our YouTube, just the Meat Mafia podcast spelled out, we've pretty much, we've gone through and uploaded basically every episode that's in there right now. We also have a Substack, which is, if you just Google the Meat Mafia podcast, the Substack will pop up. And, we do 2 to 3 1,000-word articles per week right now. And we're trying to keep ramping that up, a little bit longer form content. And then, we're also on Instagram, Meat Mafia Podcast. And then we have separate Twitter handles, which are those anonymous mafia accounts, which we can link to as well. But I mean, any of those places are good to start. And, I think for us, it's like giving people the, being able to interview guests like yourselves that are specialists, and also be able to do some writing and just talk through some of these macro level issues about, what's kind of happened with the food that we're eating and how do we actually fix it moving forward.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll definitely have links to all that. And thank you both so much for coming on today. It's been awesome to finally meet you guys. And really, really excited to keep following along with both of you.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we appreciate it. You've had a big impact on us, and we've listened to the show for some time. So it's cool for us to be guests on here, and appreciate all the work that you've done.
Thank you.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered, or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Carnivore Cast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.